Kia ora. I'm Nick Hoskins. I've been involved in the industry for many years, since the early 80s, and I got involved in Martinborough when they were starting to plant vines in this district. Today we're talking about grapevine leaf roll virus associated type 3, which is commonly known as leaf roll 3. There are a number of leaf roll viruses, I think 9 in total, but leaf roll 3 is by far the most problematic. In the early 80s, we didn't know much about it, and a lot of the material we planted was already infected with leaf roll 3. Fast forward to the 90s, and there was spread of leaf roll 3 by mealybug, and that was becoming more apparent in some of our vineyard plantings, that there was a reduction in quality, particularly in colour for red wine, but also a reduction in yield. So moving forward to, say, 2006, I think the New Zealand wine industry adopted a grafted grapevine standard. Nurseries, all involved in that, agreed to test a 100% test for leaf roll 3, all their source material and all their rootstock, and then every year after that they would test another third of it. So that stopped the spread through propagation material, but there was still a lot of virus out there being spread by mealybug. And there was some limited research going on at the time about how those mealybugs interacted with the vines and spread the virus throughout the blocks. In 2009, a colleague of mine introduced the idea that in 2 areas we would concentrate on trying to eliminate the virus. The colleague was Dr. Rod Bonfiglioli. Rod Bonfiglioli drafted up a proposal for the virus elimination project. This is just before he subsequently passed away, and so that was all in process. It was funded by the New Zealand Sustainable Farming Fund and New Zealand wine growers, so equal shares in that. The first step for the virus elimination project was to identify the extent of the problem. Initially we tried aerial photography to try and identify virus, and we had some fixed wing flyover images. That didn't really work, and subsequently we decided that we needed to GPS tag individual vines using visual symptoms of virus, which we did across that whole 800 hectares and across that 250 in Martinborough. When we showed those maps with each vine a little dot that had virus symptoms, the growers realised how big the problem was, and we had complete buy-in. They wanted to do something about it. Training wine growers is essential to managing the virus, and we spent a lot of time in the early years running numerous workshops, getting them to identify the vines, and then we also trained them to GPS mark those vines every single year of the project. We also developed a picture library for people to reference virus from, which they could use from their phone. We ended up developing an app so that they could log into that when they're out in the field and check their pictures against what they were seeing on the vines, and that was very useful in educating those growers in how to visually identify the virus. Our plan all along had been to remove virus vines, and we started that from day one of the project. So growers were identifying the vines that had symptoms and were removing those symptomatic vines, along with controlling mealybug, both chemically, but there were some organic vineyards in that program too. And so the key issues were remove the virus vines, remove the source of the virus, control the mealybug that spread the virus. We also had some science projects around what was the most effective roguing strategy or removal strategy. And by year 3 we realised that it was just removing the individual vine was correct. We did some where we removed neighbouring vines, but that wasn't necessary. We were just taking out more vines than was needed. We did encounter some difficulties that we hadn't anticipated, and that was reinfection of new vines after we'd removed and then replanted. Some of those new vines quite quickly were reinfected. Subsequent research found that the particular mealybug that we're dealing with mostly in New Zealand, Pseudococcus calceolarii, lived could live and survive underground on remnant roots that were infected with virus for quite some time, and thereby come off those remnant roots and reinfect the new vine that had been planted. So that was an issue, and we did develop some protocols around treatment of new vines with chemistry applied to the soil to try and reduce that, which largely worked. Yeah, the results of the action reduced virus on the gimlet gravels from there was 853 hectares involved, and it reduced from 13.04% down to 1.88%. And it's a real success story for that 853 hectares. In Martinborough, a similar story. Most of the original plantings that were heavily infected with virus have either been replaced or been rogued, and the situation's a lot better than it was back in 2006. So the Virus Elimination Project was an unprecedented approach to managing virus, and getting all the growers together on board with it was really the key to success. We spent a lot of time with communication with growers. We showed them the maps which guaranteed their buy-in. We also used case studies, as I mentioned before, where people didn't rogue vines but knew where they were, and we could see quite quickly what happened if you didn't rogue them. Very important to act early when you see visual symptoms of leaf roll 3, and we proved that with some case studies where people identified virus but didn't get around to removing them. The next year the problem had expanded and they had to remove more than twice as many vines as they would have if they'd acted early. Yes, what I learned from the whole experience with this elimination project are three key things: act collaboratively, act early, and be ruthless. So be ruthless with pulling out the vines, because in the long run it will save you money. There was a number of economic studies looking at just that, acting early to the value of the vineyard. What does it do? And everything in those economic studies says if you pull vines out early, you're far better off in the long run than you will be waiting for it to spread and having to pull out more vines or having to in fact replant your vineyard. So act early, act collaboratively, and be ruthless. Lastly, I'd just like to wish you all well in eliminating virus from French vineyards. I know it's a really difficult thing to do, and it's a loss of productivity for a number of years, but it's really important that you keep it out, because personally I want to see the quality of Burgundy continue, and yeah, so wishing you all well, and thanks for listening.